We have now devoted roughly 10 months. We have met almost every weekend to study Vedanta and Dharma. It's a vast subject which takes a lifetime of serious, dedicated study to have an in-depth knowledge of. We've only had something of an introduction to it, or an introduction to an introduction. Nevertheless, after 40 sessions, I hope we now have at least a fair idea of the essentials, something that all of us have been able to understand, that we could assimilate to some extent. We have touched upon the basics, the fundamentals, in both their theoretical and practical aspects. Today's class will be the last in the series, as I said, and I would like to say a few words about the relevance of what we have been studying to our everyday life, both our personal and social life. How important is Dharma to us? What is its necessity? And what is the speciality of Vedanta? What role can it play in our lives? These are the two main questions that we will be addressing today. You must please excuse me, but this being the last class, I'll need 10 to 15 minutes more than usual so I can wind up the discussions. I couldn't inform you beforehand, so those who are not prepared for the extra time, please feel free to leave when it is time for you. You will always have a recording on YouTube. So, we have been studying and discussing Dharma and Vedanta. But these days, so many factors and forces other than religion, so many forces are at work to make the world better. Cultural factors, social factors, scientific, economic, political. We have wide-ranging secular interests, and they are so pressing that many wonder if religion is necessary at all in modern life. But if we examine the situation, we will be convinced that religion has a vital, a unique role to play in today's complex life, and that it can effectively contribute to our happiness and well-being. We modern people have many problems. So how can religion solve them? First, how do we try to solve these problems ourselves? Our social and political leaders try to solve them by adjusting external conditions. With the help of science and technology, they try to lessen our miseries and promote our well-being. They encourage arts, industries, business. They spread education and research. They initiate social welfare programs of many different kinds. They open top-class medical welfare facilities. They introduce new policies, new systems, enact national, international laws, and so on and so forth. Even then we see that we are unable to cope with the situation. All these measures are aimed at the general welfare of the people, for the peace and progress of humanity, no doubt. And they are so different and widespread. But the point is, they are inadequate for the purpose. They are inadequate for the purpose by their very nature, because they don't go to the root of the problems. To solve life's problems successfully, we have to remove their root cause. If we trace the origin of these problems, in most cases we'll find that they arise not exactly from our external conditions, they arise more from our own inner weaknesses. That is the hard truth. Our personal, social, national and international problems, all of these are almost always grounded in our moral nature. Usually it is simple lack of self-control or a lack of right understanding. This is what either creates or aggravates our difficulties. Human problems are mostly psychological. As long as we carry within us any negative force, greed, egotism, anger, hatred, jealousy, fear, suspicion, as long as we carry within us these dark forces, we will have trouble wherever we may be. We can make a hell of heaven. So there is no question that it is mainly the lack of moral integrity at the personal level that makes social problems all the more complicated, all the more difficult to solve. So in the final analysis, their solution depends on our own inner goodness. None of these can be solved satisfactorily if our inner life is not sound. So the world is confronted basically with moral problems. If our very nature is bad, if we knowingly sacrifice moral ideals to material interests, if we are always guided by short-term practicality, if this is the state of affairs, no law, no system, no mutual agreements, no social theories, however well designed, nothing can save the world. It is here that Vedanta comes to help. Vedanta pays particular attention to our inner life to help us unfold our true nature. That is its special function. It helps us develop a spiritual outlook on life. And it is this spiritual outlook that actually stabilizes our moral nature, which in turn is essential to our overall well-being. We'll see how. First, if we overlook the apparent differences between the world religions, differences of doctrine, differences of belief, of practices, which are in fact externals compared to their core, if we ignore these things, three fundamental truths form the common background, the core of all religious faiths. First, in all religions, there is an ideal reality which corresponds to our conception of perfection. This is usually called the Supreme Being or God. This is thought of as a spiritual reality, pure being or pure consciousness as distinct from all phenomena. That is the first truth. Second, All religions acknowledge, directly or indirectly, all religions acknowledge that we are inherently related with this Supreme Being. That is to say, human beings are essentially spiritual beings. Our real self is neither the body nor the mind nor even a combination of these. Our real self is the immortal spirit, which is the same as the ultimate reality. This spiritual relationship between the human being and the Supreme Being, this happens to be the central principle of religious life. And this is also common to all religions, in different forms. Third, all religions hold that our self-fulfillment lies in realizing our essential relation with this Supreme Being. This is taken to be the highest goal of life. According to most theistic faiths, dualistic religions, this relation culminates in what is known as union with God. According to Advaita Vedanta, it is identity with the Absolute, with the non-dual Brahman. So, these three truths or principles form the core of all religious traditions. That means spirituality is the core of religion. One who recognizes these three spiritual principles, one who tries to live according to them, that person is said to be a spiritual person. That person is said to have developed a spiritual outlook on life. And this spiritual outlook serves two important purposes. First, it makes life meaningful. Second, it makes life sound and secure. It makes life meaningful, it makes life sound and secure. How? When the spiritual outlook is developed, what happens is one clearly understands the true purpose of life. The world we live in, however real it may appear to be, is far from an ideal existence. Here there is no guarantee even of the fulfillment of our legitimate hopes and desires. Not even that. Despite all effort to improve the conditions of life, this world continues to be a battlefield of dualities, a confused mass of opposites, good and evil, joy and sorrow, light and darkness, order and chaos. But in spite of all that, we cherish in our hearts the highest ideals of truth, goodness, love, happiness, freedom, which shows that there is within us an innate, irrepressible longing for the best, for the perfect. This is something that is inbuilt in us. So the question arises, then, life here being what it is there no way of fulfilling our spiritual urges, our quest after perfection? Is this noble urge to realize the supreme good, is this destined to just die out, or should we forget it? Vedanta says no. This ideal reality, which is beyond all dualities, Even when it is beyond all duality, this ideal reality is reachable. In fact, this is the culmination of all our knowledge. This is the fulfillment of all our desires. And beyond this, there is nothing more to seek. This is what we have to live for, in fact. To seek security in what is known to be insecure, this is not our fate. We can attain the infinite through the finite. We can reach the perfect through the imperfect. This is possible. This is what Vedanta says. With this goal in view, we should regulate all our affairs of life, try to harmonize all our thoughts, words, and actions. This is a special message of Vedanta, and it is for one and all. Anyone at whatever level of life can turn to the highest, because the relationship between us and the Supreme Being holds good whatever we are. Whether we are pure or impure, wise or unwise, we are inseparably related to the highest. So Vedanta holds before all the promise of complete freedom from all miseries, complete freedom and the attainment of supreme peace and blessedness. Jivan Mukti Sukha Prapti. If this were an impossible ideal, or if earthly enjoyment were the main objective of human life, then what hope could be there for old people in their declining years? That is the question. Or for that matter, what hope is there for young people whose prospects are ruined by misfortune? In both these cases, it would be a hopeless thing, a hopeless situation. So we see how religion, especially Vedanta, reveals the true meaning of life. We'll take it up later, but now we will see how it helps maintain order and stability in human society. When material progress unsupported by moral ideals, this is always deceptive and insecure. We see that when wealth becomes a curse, when we don't know how to use it rightly, power abused is a positive evil. Misuse scientific knowledge is a threat to humanity. Unrestrained freedom does more harm than good. So the structure of material prosperity or worldly welfare, that has to be built on a solid moral foundation. What is it that weakens our moral nature? It is the tendency to attach more importance to material values than to moral values. That is what weakens us. And that is delusive. Dharma turns our attention to the inner life. Dharma impresses on us the value of moral ideals. We learn that moral virtues ensure inner strength, inner joy, freedom. Material values, however glittering, don't do that. We may gain prosperity, but we may not have peace of mind. Wealth doesn't make us stronger, happier, or wiser. Of course, Of course, external resources are necessary to life, but we should never exchange inner goodness for them. That's what I'm trying to say. Whatever enjoyments we may seek, whatever ambitions we may pursue, we should always keep firm on the path of Dharma. The Mahabharata says, Dharma protects the one who protects it. Dharmo rakshati rakshitah. Vedanta goes a step further. It points out that our real interest lies not in self-seeking, but in self-denial. The ideal is self-denial. If we are far-sighted enough, we will know that in the long run, it doesn't pay to be selfish. Selfishness is harmful to our own best interests. So unselfishness is the best policy. And anyway, it is the basic moral quality. That is what develops all other virtues. It's a blessing in itself. Morality. Swami Vivekananda repeatedly said that when we are unselfish, our self expands. Whatever power, love, joy, and freedom a person already possesses, those will increase even more. And in the end, these things bring real self-fulfillment. The more we feel our oneness with others on a spiritual level, the closer we come to the Supreme Spirit, which happens to be the soul of all souls. The more we feel our oneness with others, the closer we come to God. The more we feel our identity with this Supreme Being, with God, the deeper our relationship with our fellow beings. So these two go together. We look upon them not only as our brothers and sisters. Gradually, it becomes clear that they are images of ourselves. That is when we'll be able to love our neighbor as ourselves. So the Vedantic outlook completely transforms our inner life, changes how we deal with others, how we look upon others. This is how it makes our world a happy, secure, and peaceful place. So we can't ignore the fact that moral and spiritual values, both of them, moral and spiritual values, are absolutely necessary even for social stability, even for material progress. We may try any number of social and political solutions. We may fully modernize our societies, raise our standard of living very high. Still, our basic problems will remain unsolved if we don't take care of moral development. As long as greed dominates the mind, as long as desire keeps provoking the mind, our wants will only multiply. Then competition will become keener and conflicts at all levels will grow increasingly severe. Hospitals won't solve the problem of disease unless we learn to live with moderation. Courts won't solve the problem of crime if people receive no moral and spiritual inspiration. And politics will not solve the problem of war as long as nations seek self-interest at the cost of dharma, at the cost of truth, justice, humanitarianism. So the moral of it all is no dharma, no shanti. For all that, it is not as if people in general are opposed or antagonistic to religion. They are rather indifferent to it. They are not all atheists or agnostics. They are just skeptical about anything that smacks of religion. Their general attitude towards religion is partly due to the advancement of science and technology, and largely due to how self-professed religious leaders have conducted themselves. But then, science itself no longer maintains its old materialistic or mechanistic worldview. It now has a deeper view of phenomenal existence, of the reality underlying the universe. Its conception of the universe doesn't contradict the existence of God, at least the God of Vedanta. So, knowledgeable people, they don't usually deny God. They just tend to ignore Him. They think that they can take care of themselves and the world without God's help. That they can make this life self-sufficient without worrying about what is beyond. They have scientific knowledge, they have technology, and they want to make this earth a nice place to live. They are full of hope. So they have a this worldly attitude, an affirmative attitude, which is very, very often applauded as life positive. Life positive, a nice expression. But unfortunately, it doesn't produce the desired effect. We can easily see through its superficiality, its falsity. In fact, this attitude is considerably responsible for our present predicament. The point is this: if we don't include in our scheme of life any higher existence, if there is no place for a higher reality beyond this material world, then what happens is our minds naturally become focused on the world that is perceivable by the senses. The mind always wants something to cling to, and this is what it sees. As a result of that, the sensuous outlook on life prevails. To enjoy earthly existence in all the variety, in all the richness of sense experience, that becomes the ideal of life. Then, knowledge is cultivated for so-called practical ends. This is what happens. Science, arts, philosophy, even education, education which is supposed to be the natural remedy for all social evils, even that. And why? Ethics itself, everything becomes increasingly subordinated to, made to serve the needs of this so-called practical life, which after all is nothing but a sensuous life. So what happens? They all degenerate. They are supposed to lift us up, but they lose their uplifting power. Achievement on the material level, that becomes the measure of everything. I have this much, how much do you have? In fact, this false idea of progress has been current for nearly 400 years. This is what has happened. So we see how the spiritual outlook strengthens our moral nature and the sensuous outlook weakens it. Dharma is necessary not only for religious people, it is necessary for everybody. Worldly wisdom is not everything. For that matter, even intelligence, worldly intelligence of a higher caliber, that does not develop without moral goodness. It is virtue, it is purity that brightens the intellect. It is purity of heart that converts intelligence into insight. We know from everyday experience that our reasoning doesn't function properly unless the mind is free from emotional involvement. This everybody knows. So, our rationality, of which we are so proud, our rationality depends more on our morality than our morality does on our rationality. What we need more is insight. It may be true that we can develop an ethical sense, a sense of morality without spirituality, without being spiritual. As thinking beings, as rational beings, we can see that our joy and sorrow are interconnected with those of our fellow beings. We know that we don't grow in isolation. If we want to live in peace, individual interests have to be interwoven with collective interests. If everyone tries to preserve their own interest, regardless of the interests of others, then the interest of all will suffer in the end. So, this much we know. It is to our own advantage that we make our self-interest at least consistent with the common interest. Now, this sounds perfectly reasonable. Live and let live. This is what is known as enlightened self-interest. Another nice term, enlightened self-interest. A policy of mutual give and take. It should be possible to live by this standard of enlightened interest and achieve prosperity and peace. To all appearance, this should be enough. But actually, in the long run, even this doesn't go very far. As an ethical standard, this policy of live and let live, or the policy of give and take, as an ethical standard, this may be enough. But it can never be the ideal. For that, it is too weak, too inadequate. Because if you see through it, it is nothing more than an exchange. It is just a trade-off. When something more is asked for me, as is bound to happen sooner or later, when something more is demanded, I will know how weak this standard is. Because I am not prepared to sacrifice beyond a certain point. Because it does not, this standard, this moral standard, that it does not regard unselfishness as a virtue or a value in itself. then what is the ideal? The ideal is something much higher. There is a certain difference between the standards that we adopt and the ideal that we have to reach. So the ideal is always something much higher. Here, the ideal is selflessness. Moral life can never be complete without selflessness until we know that our self-fulfillment lies in wiping out the egoistic self. Until we understand that our real self-fulfillment lies in loving and serving our fellow beings as an end in itself, not for any selfish motive. Until we see that, we are never truly moral. So the ideal of ethics is self-denial, selflessness. Not to be less selfish. It is to be selfless. But then, can this high ideal of perfect selflessness, can this ideal ever be practiced? It can't be practiced unless we feel a spiritual oneness with all. If we are not spiritual, we cannot have this ideal. No human relationship based on these so-called common secular interests. Nothing based on things like that can make us selfless in the true sense. It is only when we recognize the Supreme Being, it is only when we feel God, who is the indwelling spirit in all. It is only then that we become aware of our spiritual relationship with others. So, except for an all-embracing spiritual relationship, except in that case, disinterested, selfless love, this has no meaning in human life. Only spiritual people can practice that. Now we see how morality and ethics, how dharma leads to adhyatma, to spirituality. This is where the two overlap. Morality always leads to spirituality when it is sincerely practiced. Morality always leads to spirituality, and spirituality always strengthens morality. So in the end, it turns out that spirituality is the final solution to all our problems. We have to become spiritual. There can only be a spiritual solution, even to our so-called worldly problems. There is no such thing as a worldly solution. A worldly solution can at best be a patchwork solution. We can be sure of that. Now let us see what the specific problems of modern life are. Let us see how Vedanta solves them. What do we generally want? The common run of people in general, want enjoyment, they want happiness. Very few care for the peace of detachment or for the joy of renunciation. They have no idea of it. These things are generally associated with spiritual life, and spiritual life can wait. People want to enjoy the good things of life, And they want a stable and secure life. They want more and more of these things. And they expect everything to keep getting better and better. But religion in general, religion is not opposed to any of our ambitions or enjoyments, as long as they are legitimate, as long as they are morally justifiable. Religion doesn't treat any of our achievements or accomplishments as inferior. That's a very wrong idea. It only wants us to remember that material values, however bright and shiny, they should never be rated higher than moral values. That is important. We should never seek to be prosperous at the cost of our moral life. Because in the long run, that will prove to be self-defeating. We just saw that. One can gain wealth by unfair means, but not inner peace, not freedom or joy. Our moral nature is the very basis of all development. Our overall well-being rests on this. Acquire as much wealth as you can in whatever form, enjoy life in as many ways as you can, but never deviate from dharma. That is the command of religion in general. Surely people can gain prosperity by honest ways if they have the patience to try it, as Swami Vivekananda says. Again, Vedanta goes a bit further. That is all very well. But Vedanta wants us not to be tied down by temporary things, even at their best. Vedanta doesn't want us to be tied down to temporary things, even at their best. Its aim is to lead us gradually from the search of the impermanent, from the transitory to the search of the eternal. It recognizes the fact that human beings are born with sense desires. This it knows. And that these desires are deep-rooted. And that they have to outgrow them in a well-regulated life of experience. Vedanta gives plenty of allowance for all that. In fact, it even goes to the extent of saying that only then can people have any higher aspiration, any desire to know the ideal reality that is beyond the senses. That is why it recommends such a thoroughly planned scheme of life, which takes into account all aspects of life, personal and social, private and public, individual and collective. We learned something of all this during our study of Dharma. So, that is the first problem. Another problem pressing on modern people is how they can be intensely active and at the same time maintain inner balance. Swami, what we now need is not more of religion or spirituality. What we need urgently is the secret of inner poise, peace. If you could teach us this, you will be doing us a great help. What we want is a relief from tension, from mental tension. This is something that is heard very, very frequently. But not many realize how very necessary spirituality is for maintaining inner balance. It doesn't occur to them that the basic cause of mental unrest, mental tension, which is so common in modern life, it is this sensuous outlook. People don't want to see it. They are happy with short-term solutions. Emotional disturbances are inevitable when the mind is in the grip of desires and ambitions. Negative feelings will dominate the mind if I am overly involved in worldly things. If I cling to sense pleasure and at the same time want to remain free from emotional upsets, this is something self-contradictory. This will never be. If one wants peace of mind, one has to be interested in higher values. One has to detach oneself from lower things. Vedanta guarantees that one who holds on to moral values can maintain composure. Such people will, they might lose their composure. They might appear to have lost their balance, but it will be for a very short time. They are very, very resilient. They'll find their center of gravity very quickly with the help of Vedanta, with the help of this spiritual outlook. We need to understand that what is pleasant may not necessarily be good. The highest good is beyond the duality of pleasure and pain. That is the ideal reality. But when we make that our ultimate goal, we have that in view and look upon this life as a means to that supreme end, then we become free from attachment. Then we can live and work with a dispassionate attitude without being too swayed by external things. We can remain calm under changing conditions. We can see things objectively because we won't be depending on transitory enjoyments or possessions. This is the second problem and solution. And a third challenge in modern life is how our ever-widening contact with others, how this can be free from discord, from disharmony and strain. These are times when we are in extremely close contact with many different kinds of people in many different ways. Every day we come in touch with people of different nationalities, different races, different cultural backgrounds. It is very necessary that my interactions with people of various backgrounds, different temperaments, tastes, beliefs, it should all be cordial and harmonious. Mere superficial friendliness, a policy of cooperation, just this won't accomplish, won't solve the problem. We need a deeper understanding of one another's position. There has to be a genuine feeling for others, regardless of so-called common interests. And here, nothing but spirituality can help us on this point. That is the only way to become spiritual. Vedanta teaches that the man I regard as a stranger is actually a brother in disguise. Or no, he is my own self in another form. So in helping others, I help myself. In hurting others, I hurt myself. Because the one and the same Supreme Spirit is the soul of all souls. When we recognize this truth, we can establish a spiritual relationship with all. This is the only way to pure, selfless, universal love, to be spiritual, and to look upon others as spiritual beings. So, to be able to live harmoniously with the rest of the world, one has to develop not just an international outlook, but a universal outlook, which only spirituality can give. Spiritual unity at the spiritual level is all embracing. That is the unity of all unities. It is something that runs through all differences, underlies all differences. And this is the Vedantic vision. This vision gives us the most comprehensive, inclusive view of things. We learn to look upon multiplicity as nothing but the manifestation of the one transcendent reality. Vedanta says that there is only one source of all truth. One source of all truth, beauty and love. Of all that is good and great. So there is no essential difference between one manifestation and another. The difference is only in the mode of expression. When we become aware of the fundamental unity, when we see the unity underlying the diversity of outer forms, then no outer expression, no manifestation, however low it may appear, no manifestation can create any wrong feeling in us. Then we approach all with equal sympathy, equal understanding. This is how the one world ideal, which is so much talked about these days, this is how it is realized. It is only then that this world of ours becomes like one huge nest of countless happy birds of different feathers. To say it in the words of the Veda, Yatra Vishwam Bhavatyeka. This world of ours becomes like one huge nest of countless happy birds of different feathers. So, finally, what is the role and function of Vedanta? In what way is it relevant to us? What makes it special? The speciality of Vedanta lies, to summarize, the speciality of Vedanta lies in this twofold function of its. It transforms human personality and it transforms human relationships. This has always been its role. Vedanta is concerned more with our inner nature than with our external affairs. And it is based on one simple truth, that there cannot be a better world without a better people. It makes us aware of our real self, Nitya Shuddha Buddha Mukta, ever pure, ever free, immortal, and divine. It arouses faith in our higher nature, which is key to all inner unfoldment. The animal in us is transformed into a God, into a divine being. It's a happy thing that in these days there is a growing awareness of our inner potentialities. And this has made us receptive to this Vedantic teaching. It's a happy thing. We now know that the spiritual self within is the real master, and that we are that spiritual self. Just the awareness of this truth, just this much, it places us in a position of control of ourselves, I mean. It makes it possible for us to integrate our inner resources. It enables us to be our own masters. It is like waking up to our higher self, so to say. And sooner or later, this self-awakening leads to the recognition of the same spiritual self in others also. So, our attitude towards our fellow beings also changes. We are not mere human beings. We are essentially divine beings. This is the message of Vedanta. Though we may appear to be human, pure or impure, strong or weak, though we may appear to be human, the same divine self shines equally within all of us. That is what fills our heart with due regard for everybody. We learn to deal with every individual with proper respect. We begin to see God as the indwelling spirit in all beings. And how do we worship this God? By service. So, in this way, by teaching us to see God in ourselves and to see the same God in others, Vedanta transforms our personality. Vedanta spiritualizes our relationships with others. This is how it prepares the way to universal love. Be divine and help others become divine. Swamiji said, be and make. This, according to Swami Vivekananda, this, be and make. Be divine and help others become divine. This is the special mission of Vedanta. So, may that divine that is present everywhere, the divine that dwells within our own hearts, may that divine bestow upon us the strength, the courage to live up to the teachings of Dharma and Vedanta. With this heartfelt prayer on my lips, I bring this series to a close.